So that's how it started, and I really liked it. I liked the way that I can write something in a particular order, and then somehow it works. Somehow there's like with this magic, I see something on the screen, or I see some operations which are being executed. So it's like an extra power of a developer to do something that a computer listens and behaves and executes it.
Hi friends! My guest today is Maria Korneeva. She's a software engineer, currently primarily focusing on Angular framework for JavaScript and TypeScript. Maria loves sharing what she finds useful by writing articles on her blog or presenting them at conferences.
I think in metaphors quite often, and finding a suitable metaphor is a lot of fun to me. So yesterday, before falling asleep, I was thinking about RxJS and how it's like a stream of water, and how I can depict all the concepts from RxJS, like switch map or filter or map or tab, whatever, as a as a visual, as a stream of water, as a tap with water coming out of it.
Our conversation was about Maria's journey to becoming a software engineer, her challenges overcoming imposter syndrome, and how she eventually found herself being a very proactive member of software engineering community. Unfortunately, we had to cut our conversation short, but I still hope you will find something valuable there. And now, here is Maria. If you can tell a little bit about kind of your journey to becoming maybe a software engineer, because I know that you wanted to become a software engineer and you didn't, it is not the first thing that you were doing linguistics and stuff, and it would be nice to know.
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, I wanted to become a developer in the first place when I was at the high school, and I talked to my mother. My mother, she writes some scripts, she does some statistics. I don't know exactly what she's doing, but I know it was always that she was programming something, but not being a programmer. I don't know, some helping functions. So, and she said, it's not a very good idea because I'm a short-sighted person and I'm going to work a lot with computers, which is not good for my sight. But actually now looking back, it's not really reasonable, because there's so many professions where you sit and work on computer the whole day. So, and then the second thing that she told me was that this is a man domain, and it's really hard to be a developer, like a female developer in there. That was back in 2007, I think. So I said yes, maybe not. And I was very lazy, so I had the option to study linguistics without any additional examinations. So I decided to do that. I quite soon realized that this is something which it is okay, but I just don't like it because of the way it functions. Like all the humanities is more about the authorities, the quotation, and the interpretation, and that was not it's a 0 or 1, it compiles or it doesn't compile. So I soon realized I actually still want to be a developer. And that's why, but I still completed my studies because, once I studied it, I wanted to accomplish it. But then I switched to studying IT. So I was a bachelor in business informatics because there was a break, I completed my linguistic studies and started to work as an event manager with the German language. That's what was a practical appliance of my studies. But then I still realized that's not what I want to do. So I started, I went back to university and studied business informatics because I thought IT, it's what I wanted to do. I was a bit scared if I gonna manage it. So I decided to add some economics, so to have a mix, to have it easier. Well, I ended up liking IT more than economics. That's how I focused on the development part. But the whole story about it was that I studied linguistics with that was major in German, but it was also to become a teacher of German as a foreign language. And then I moved on, and so I thought saw myself as an IT consultant, and there was really an inner dialogue what is in common there? Why I'm just, like not having a straight line of my career? What is the reason behind switching those careers, and how, like, is there anything which is in common for those two professions? And I realized that this is more like helping others, and that's the underlying common ground, both for being a teacher of foreign languages and being an IT consultant or a developer, because as a developer I also help my clients to implement some features to make the web more accessible, more UX friendly, and all this stuff. So that was the story of my different subjects.
And like, just for me to understand a little bit better, when you were talking a little bit about the inner dialogue, right? Do I understand correctly that what you kind of were trying to do is kind of reconcile both things that you were interested in and things that you have spent time on? Basically, how can you use both your knowledge from linguistics and other areas along with your passion for programming, let's say, right? Together, right? How to... Okay, interesting. And like, you said that you wanted to do... You were doing... But in the first place, because you said that you wanted to do software engineering even before that, but it kind of didn't work out.
Yeah.
But how did you learn, like, in the first place about the fact that computers exist and what they do and stuff like that?
Well, we had a very strict teacher in the school. So we had informatics and programming, so like some really theoretical stuff, and then doing some programming in Pascal. So many people here start with Java. However, my journey started with Pascal, and our teacher tended to say, if you can manage Pascal, then you can manage any other programming language. So that was like with Go too, and this usual school stuff. We were designing some, I don't remember, there was a train that had to move from right to the left and all this stuff. So that's how it started, and I really liked it. I liked the way that I can write something in a particular order, and then somehow it works. Somehow there's like, with this magic, I see something on the screen, or I see some operations which are being executed. So it's like an extra power of a developer to do something that a computer listens and behaves and executes it.
But because it's interesting, because I first started when I started programming computers. Pascal also was the first programming language that I was using. To be honest, I don't remember if I were using Go-tos there. I do remember that I was using like jumps and stuff like this in assembler, which is like, okay, anyways. But for me, for example, the reason why I love kind of programming is because it is kind of you're solving small little problems and you get excited when you solve them.
Yes.
This is what I enjoy, I think, the most about programming, right? And only after that I started even more appreciate the rigorousness of the expression, right? I'm not sure exactly if I understood you correctly, but at some you mentioned that you kind of didn't like linguistics because it was kind of too maybe vague, abstract, and not concrete. When programming is more like closer to math and more like specific things. Is it correct now?
It used to be correct back then because I liked the easy way to say I'm right or wrong if you code, because either your program does what it's supposed to do or not, and it was a very simplified view on it, because the more you dig deeper into the code and the code conventions and best practices, the more you're getting into the role of an architect, and then it's again more about it depends. It's about talking to the client and analyzing the situation, the requirements, and then trying to figure out what is the most efficient way. It's no longer about right or wrong, 0, 1, true, false. It's more about what's the best. And then again, it's there's the room for interpretation. What's the best, and how do you measure this? And now I see some parallels. Actually, I realized, like, I really like the expression that you used, that was reconcile. I've been doing a lot of reconciliation between linguistics and the world of texts and programming or development. Because for me, it does make sense that linguists can be good developers, because the same processes that you get some unstructured data, which is text or speech or requirements, and then you try to put it into the form of an algorithm, and you try to provide a structure for the unstructured world. So now I thought I lost my thoughts, but yeah, that's the things in common between those two areas. So I'm no longer thinking that like linguistics is too vague and I don't like it, because as of now I see the same in the development, that it's no longer about this particular line of code. It's more about the requirements of the project and the best possible implementation.
I'm just thinking about that, you were doing linguistics, right? And I don't know even how to describe it, but what I'm thinking about is that it is very, very, like, even if we are moving between different, if we are changing careers, we still can leverage a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience that we gained, right? And I'm thinking just, if I were doing, I don't know, go and build rockets, for example, right, instead of programming computers, I do feel that a lot of experience and knowledge that I have gained would be helpful. Yes, there would be some barrier to start, and I would need to catch up on this specific domain, right? But a lot of things, even like working, because most of the time we are working with people, right? And a lot of this could be kind of reused.
Yeah, sure.
in terms of okay, that's interesting. And like right now, like did you start to so basically you started linguistics, then you went to doing programming, but when did you start to do more like a community, proactive community and knowledge sharing in the community?
Well, I think it started in 2019. I switched the job. I used to be more a consultant, like more analyzing the code, our logs, and doing some controlling, something like this. And I said, like, I want to be a developer. I want to, instead of seeing some null pointer exceptions in the logs, I want to produce my own null pointer exceptions. And that's like, I dig deeper into the coding. And it started with actually quite selfish in the first place, because I wanted to write down the things that I had in my mind. Like, we had some implementations for cookie banner, and I found it really interesting in the context of the GDPR with this whole data privacy laws. So I wanted to jot it down because I knew that cookie banners is something which you have in every single project. So I just wrote an article, and well, I wanted to write one, and then I started, and I realized there's way more that I want to share with the world, but also know to myself. So it was like two-purpose thing. First, the documentation for myself, but then I realized it is fun to write. And maybe there is someone who also could find it useful. If I find it useful, then maybe someone else as well. And the third thing that evolved from it was that maybe someone else comes and says, oh, look, I have a better idea or a different idea. And in our project, we're doing this like this. So I was hoping a lot that people will comment on my blogs, and I will learn from them. They will learn from me. We will all learn from each other. It didn't happen. Like, there were some likes, but there was not that many comments, but like nobody knew me. And then one day a person contacted me on Twitter and asked if I would like to write for NGConf, and that's the biggest conference in Angular, about Angular in the world. And that was like a complete, like it was a miracle to me. I agreed, and I started to do that and writing blogs. I got into the conferences, so being a writer for NGConf, I also was able to submit a lighting talk, and I had my 5 minutes of fame. And then I realized that there is this community, because I was not aware that such things exist, because I still do imagine that there are many developers that just want to code, and they're not interested about other coders, or the whole community, and that there is a thing, such a thing. And for me, I started to realize that there are people that I like and that I see as experts, and they are all also interconnected, and they also know cool people. So you start to connect the dots, and you start to realize that there is like such a thing. There is this unity. There are those conversations, like the more people you know, the more fun it is, and to go to conferences, to see them again, to have those conversations. So that's how it evolved for me. Maybe there is also a fourth thing. So as I mentioned, documentation for myself, then sharing and learning, hoping that it's helpful for others, but also the fourth thing is that, how do you put it? That's a longer story, but being a junior developer I always felt safe, because there was always someone out there who was able to support me. Like, if you have those senior colleagues, and that's fine, you can try something out, but you're never desperate, because if you were if you were stuck, you can go and ask someone. And I knew that someday the day will come that there won't be this senior colleague, because someone says you are now senior. And I was really scared, because there's no one else in the company they can ask. And that's why I thought about the community as this senior colleague that I can ask. So this is also something like some comforting thought, that I'm not alone. So if I'm stuck, I still can ask for help. Like, hashtag Stack Overflow, but in person. Yeah. So that's how it started for me.
It sounds so like. In a sense, it sounds similar to a situation that I had in my life, because when I was also a junior software engineer, I was very lucky in a sense that when I was just starting like serious programming in the industry, I had an opportunity to work with a person who is a really good engineer. And to this day, I have seen many people. To this day, I believe from like pure engineering skills, he's like top 3 people that I know for sure, right? And I was working with him. And when I was just starting, I was asking like a lot of questions, like, how do you want to do that? How do you want to do that? How do you want to do that? And at some point he told me that I need to kind of stop asking questions because there's just too much. And in a sense, it was very important for me, because I wanted to develop my skills, right? And I wanted to become better. And this kind of forced me to kind of understand where the boundary is between when it is like completely hopeless and I cannot move forward at all, or when I am just like lazy and I want someone to tell me what to do, right, or something like this. this balance is very difficult to find, and this situation forced me to actually sit there and not go and ask questions for quite some time. But maybe sometimes it wasn't like as productive, right? But overall, I would say that it was very important experience in my life, and it has taught me a lot about taking on the problems and solving them myself. And all this experience has kind of made a significant impact on how I was moving forward in my career and like development and stuff like this. And this is what you are also saying, that at some point, because I'm no longer work with those people, quite often when I work with people, like I need to help people. So it is very nice, and just a story.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, like you started with Pascal, right? You, of course, you are now doing like JavaScript, TypeScript, Angular. Have you like used any other languages, like major languages during your career, or those are the primary ones that you've been using and familiar with?
Well, I've tried out several of them, like Java, of course. Well, we like at the university we tried several languages out, but I don't think that counts. But I found it really interesting to. That's like with foreign languages as well, or with different philosophies. The more languages you know, the broader is your perspective, because then suddenly you realize, oh, your language, like you can think this way, or oh, you can apply this and that, or oh, you can do this in this language. So I also tried Haskell. There was a huge impact on me, because that was a completely different language. Later on, I wrote some programs in Flutter, but Flutter is based on Dart, and so what else? Like, of course, Vue as well. Those are the major ones, and of course, Visual Basic.
That's interesting. I have never actually programmed in Visual Basic, even though it is kind of like a lot of people I know like touched it at some point in their life, but I have never done this.
It was fun because yes, just to tell the story about the Visual Basic, like that was the fact that I was not working I was not even developing at that moment of my career. And then suddenly I wanted to optimize something, and it was like, bam, now you have to learn a new language. And it's been a while at that point since I learned a new language, and it was a really good experience. So I think maybe it's just like a good thing to try a new language even once in a while. So yeah, that was cool.
I wanted to ask, you said you were using Haskell a little bit, at least trying to get like a sense of it, right? And do you use those concepts in your most of the time, or not?
Well, Haskell, no. It was more broadening the experience and knowing that there's not only the TypeScript, JavaScript universe. There are other languages like, functional, procedural, declarative. So there are different ways of thinking which come along with the programming language. So it's I don't work with Haskell any longer, but apparently Haskell influenced the reducers a lot. So the way that the MapReduce works heavily relies on these mathematical constructions which are baked into Haskell. But it's so many years ago. I think I'm not really able to talk about Haskell anymore.
Because for me, for example, I have tried all sorts of different languages. Like it's even like, but what I found is that most there is kind of language and syntax of it, and there are also paradigms different, right? And I do enjoy paradigm much more because this is the way how they kind of break your mind in a sense. Because I don't like different syntax because it is just you just need to learn, but you're not getting anything like completely new. Maybe sometimes, but right. But for example, I was like maybe like I don't know, let's say 4 years ago or something like this. First of all, I was interested in functional programming for a long time, but I didn't really know how to apply it to real life problems. It was always like when you go and watch some talk or read some article, it was okay. We have pure functions and we how it is. I mean, I get it about how pure function, but how do I build like an app with that, right? End to end, right? Backend, front end, whatever. And maybe like 3-4 years ago, I discovered the libraries like FPTS in TypeScript, right? And it was a right for me to understand the concept. I was quite familiar with JavaScript at that point, but trying to understand the concept itself, it was hard. And especially the fact that it is not like as mainstream. For this reason, there is not like a lot of articles, like a lot of videos you kind of need to figure out. And this is the first time in my career where and the interesting thing about FPTS, especially when I was starting, I'm not sure, I think it is still the case, but when I was starting, is that you have a library, you know it is good. There's no documentation, but you know it is good in terms of concepts because it's basically allows you to do functional programming in TypeScript. And it is not like when you go to like Redux website and there is like examples, everything is very neatly organized and you can read and learn. It's like here's code kind of figured out, and it was hard. And it is like I guess those situations are the most difficult situations for me from programming point of view, when you kind of have code and you need to figure it out and there's no documentation at all. Because I have recently been looking into TinyGrad, which is AutoGrad and Tensor's library for machine learning and stuff like this, right? First of all, it is written in Python, which is like interesting. You need to figure it out Python. But other thing is that it is 200 lines. They are very, 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 very complex. The goal there is to fit as much as possible in as the smallest number of lines, just for the sake of it. And there's no documentation, and you need to figure out how it works. Those projects, for me to understand, are from technical point of view have been the most challenging, I think, because the rest is just like go read documentation. Yeah, it may take some time, but eventually you will get it. But another thing I remember, I wanted to say that at some point I was also trying to implement an algorithm. You know, in Git, the comparison algorithm, how they, like, basically you have two strings of text and you need to find what has changed. And I had an algorithm that I also needed to figure out how it works and implement it. It was a little bit better because I had like a little bit of documentation there, but it was like, you know, like a paper, science paper with, I don't know, 2 paragraphs of explanation with very mathematical oriented and it was also like, I'm just like remember the most challenging, I guess, experiences in my life as a software engineer. So please go ahead.
No, actually, I can relate. I had it once with a framework called CAS. I don't remember what it stands for. It was a pretty traumatic experience for me. We're supposed to implement a single sign-on based on this framework, and it is developed by a university and is mostly used by universities, but also like maybe 10 of them in the world. And there is a website with some documentation, but it just doesn't fit. Maybe it's out of date, maybe it was, it was just not enough. And what I did there, and that brings me back to the hashtag community, I try to figure out who is dealing with this framework as well. So maybe I can ask them, because like if you cannot rely on the documentation, then I go to some Twitch, to some Discord channels, to some mailing lists, whatever, trying to reach to people that have this experience. If I cannot do this by myself. So yeah, that's what I did. I tried to find out. I think I joined the Discord channel at that time to have a look.
That's interesting, because before I started, for a long time I kind of was reading stuff from the internet, but I have never had an opportunity to ask someone, right? When I was another strange experience from my life, when I was trying to figure out how the Excel format works, I needed to solve some problem. I don't even remember what the problem was.
Okay.
I remember that they had to figure out how the Excel works and worked inside, and there's no one to ask basically from me, right? And I never thought about kind of trying to reach out. I don't know, maybe I was too shy to reach out to people on the internet. I don't know, I don't remember. But I do know that anyways, another thing I wanted to ask is so you said that you started to get involved into the community and you started to write for the NG, and after all of this is kind of naturally developed in a sense that you're now like giving talks and writing it, right? And you still want to do that and to continue doing that, right?
Sure. Yeah, I just want to find time to do this. For now it's a bit challenging, but I have a lot of ideas. Like yesterday, before falling asleep, I was thinking about reactive programming. I really like this again, a paradigm. I was thinking about RxJS and how complex this thing was to me, like a couple of years ago. I remember seeing the code of my colleague and having to review it, and I was like, oh no, I don't get what he's doing there. And now I think in metaphors quite often, and finding a suitable metaphor is a lot of fun to me. So yesterday, before falling asleep, I was thinking about RxJS and how it's like a stream of water, and how I can depict all the concepts from RxJS, like switch map or filter or map or tap, whatever, as a as a visual, as a stream of water, as a tap with water coming out of it. So yeah,
that's RxJS is nice. It's nice. I've been using it. I enjoy it as well.
But yeah, as you coming back to your question, I just need to find time to keep going. But of course, it is still fun, and it switches from I used to write more. Now I'm talking more. But usually it comes with an idea, and then I try to put it into as many forms as I can. So if I have an idea, I might write an article, I might code something, I might have a blog post, I might have a tweet on this. So it's just trying to produce different forms, because different forms help different people. So someone is more about visuals and pictures, someone is more about seeing just the code, someone is more about listening to some topics. So yeah.
Do you want to try to kind of, is it for you this, is it more like a hobby for you and trying a thing that you're enjoying doing, or do you want to develop it in more your primary focus? sharing the knowledge with the community and stuff like that?
Well, I'm working as a trainer for Angular as well, so that's what I'm doing. Like that's my paid job, but it's not the main job. Like my main job as a developer. I do some training and writing and speaking at conferences is something which is like a byproduct, because I think that I try to find some interesting topics from what I'm doing, and all this productive thing is more like a hobby to me. It's quite a challenging one because I am a very slow writer. Like it's not that I'm super skilled in writing and talented in this, but it's just it is like some kind of masochistic fun, because it takes a lot of time to find the right phrasing. It takes a lot of time to finish this article. But once it's finished, it's really joy. Then I'm really helpful. I'm really, really happy that I've done that. But that's like this ambivalence of this hobby. When doing, it's tedious. Like the whole preparation, it takes a lot of time to prepare a talk. I'm always super nervous giving those talks, so it's just really not easy. But once it's done, it's nice. I'm happy that I managed it.
It's kind of, yeah, it is nice when like a small problems that you can overcome, right? This is what is exciting to work on, right? Those small problems in life, in programming, and not only. For me, for example, writing, because I have tried to write as well, and the problem that I have when I'm trying to write is that I have an idea that I want to express, and I like, let's say I have a sentence, and then I'm thinking about, okay, what is important in this sentence? Everything else I just start to kind of throw away, and slowly this sentence turns in like 2 words, for example, and it is like, I don't know, be a good person, right? And it is kind of, yes, true, but why? And I have always like went to this like trying to, to make the sentences as powerful as possible, to express as deep ideas as possible with them, but they are always very kind of short, and it has always been, it bothers me a little bit, and for this reason I don't post that much of the text content, right? I have tried with Twitter and stuff like this, but Twitter is a little bit different thing, because I was talking with other people about this, but every time on Twitter I have like a thing in my head that like, Igor, you need to go to do something productive, right? You cannot spend time here. It is not, I mean, it is kind of productive, but it is not, because I don't know, right? But the thing that I'm working on right now is I'm trying to create educational series in a video format, and one of the things is that there are a couple of different areas I have in mind that I want to cover. And for example, I think there are better ways to explain certain things, right? For example, I do love the fact that any person who has internet access pretty much can go on YouTube and learn from the lectures that are published by pretty much the best universities like Stanford, MIT, and stuff like this. I do love them, but I look at them and I have learned from them, but it is kind of challenging to learn from them, because they are just recordings of the teacher explaining with a whiteboard or something like this, right? But I'm thinking of like, if you are doing like YouTube, and a lot of other people already doing this, instead of writing on blackboard something and asking students to kind of imagine that it is like 3D, why you not go to like YouTube and actually make it 3D and make it rotate and stuff like that, right? So I think there is a lot of potential in in how to optimize the learning process for the people, right? It is just makes it much more easier. For example, there is a person, I'm pretty much sure because there is like 3-1B, do you know that?
3-1B?
3 blue, 1 brown, I think it is.
No.
The way, and there are a lot of different other people, like just amazing people, and I can share some examples with you because I saved them because I want to learn from them in order to apply to my personal knowledge, right? To my personal approach and how I build those services and stuff like this. But for example, I was trying to learn much more about the math, like linear algebra, multivariable calculus, and stuff like that. And the way how, first of all, the way how they explain, but in addition to how they explain, the way how they visualize certain concepts and stuff like I have wasted so much time in school and in university. And what have I been doing? So yeah, and this is what I want, this is like one of the things that I want to help with, and I'm working on this series. We'll see where it goes.
Sounds great.
What interests me. And I know there is one other thing that I wanted to talk with you is you mentioned about that at some point you kind of had to deal a little bit with the imposter syndrome and how to especially I think when you were starting as an engineer and now you're working as a lead engineer and you're teaching other people, right? And can you please tell maybe some insight that you have for this journey for you, and maybe some useful actionable things that people can really use, even if there is one that helped you, maybe it will also help someone.
Yeah, indeed, there is one thing that helped me. I'm still struggling with the imposter syndrome. I'm not out of this. Well, the thing that helped me to realize that this is just in my head and not some universal truth and everyone is pointing at me was the preparation for the Google Developer Expert status. That there is a whole process and you have to apply and you have to submit all the things that you've been doing. And I had to write down all the articles that I published, all the conference talks that I had, all the other things, and then I looked at the list and I realized that this is a lot. And then I realized that I am actually doing a lot, and that was quite objective because that was there on black on white, you see it written there, and this is inarguable. And that helped me to appreciate it. This is looking back and having this retrospective. Well, this is a bit too cheesy to say, but it's really hard to follow. But actually, it's not helpful to compare yourself with others, but only with yourself. And this is exactly what it is. If you have this retrospective, if you look at yourself a couple of months ago, 10 years ago, I don't know, 20 years ago, and you realize that you've been improving yourself and you've achieved a lot, then it helps to own it, because the thing is that many imposter people, people with the imposter syndrome, they don't take it as theirs, and that's why they don't feel that they deserve it, because they don't digest it, don't own their success, trying to say, oh, that was just nothing, or there was a lucky coincidence. So for me, the goal is to make things to help me own it, for example, by making this list. And what I'm personally doing as well, which doesn't help me, but I hope it helps others, I'm talking open that I also have this imposter syndrome, because many people have it. I've looked up some statistics. Apparently, that 80% of developers do have something like this. So when I openly admit that I am also struggling and I have some confidence issues and I'm not sure if I'm an expert, then it helps the others to see that they are also not alone, and this is something which is not about them. It's just maybe part of this industry. I don't know. Yeah, and what I also looked up as like I thought like what suggestions can I give? Apparently, if people are in a unique position, something like being a LGBTQ person, or I don't know, being a female person in a man-dominated area, or being, I don't know, a person of color, whatever. If there is something which makes you unique in an environment, this person tends to feel this pressure of representing this group. And then it adds on onto the imposter syndrome. And in this case, it's even natural to say, like, look, it's okay to feel this pressure. It's not, but again, it's not about this person, it's about these circumstances. So trying to realize that those are just feelings. It's not the reality, it's just the emotions that we have, and the way we're thinking and not the way we are. So yeah, this is how I try to help myself. That's like inner talk, which happens from time to time.
To calm down
Yes.
oneself.
Yes.
I have been also thinking about this because this is I know that this would be one thing that I wanted to talk with you about, and like one thing that I wanted to share, and I'm not sure if it works for everyone, but this is what worked for me. And I have a very interesting experience with public speaking. Right. First of all, I before I started my kind of professional career working in the industry, I was quite shy and I didn't really talk publicly at all, but I always wanted to. I was always sitting in the audience and looking at the people who kind of on the stage, right? And I want to do something like this. It was very interesting for me. And at one point, I kind of got an opportunity to give a small tech talk. And it was at the very early stages of my career. I was junior engineer. And this very senior person that I mentioned before helped me to prepare the talk. And it was a very interesting story because first of all, it was in English. I didn't know English at that point, like pretty much at all, but I decided to do this as a challenge anyways. And the interesting thing, I just learned the whole thing by heart.
Wow.
And I went there and I just spoke like yeah. Дед Мороз, стихотворение. Yeah, so so this is what I was doing, and then I also got a few other opportunities to present, and at a little bit later stage when I was a little bit more knowledgeable in terms of the industry, but I was still I remember that one talk I was giving, I kind of went there. I didn't know everything by heart this time around, but I kind of knew only this area, and I was extremely cautious about people asking anything outside of it. And but it went well. Nobody really kind of challenged me that much at that point. But what I learned after, and my kind of response to being anxious about all of this was to try to get actually pretty good at what you know, in a sense that, and this is what I learned also, that if you go and present some topic and you have a whole body of knowledge and you only talk about 10% of your knowledge, you feel much more comfortable because you have enough buffer to go in any direction. And for me, it kind of turned into a challenge to understand. I want to learn the whole thing in terms of software, and it went to the point where I learned JavaScript, then I went deeper. I was learning C, assembler, how computers works, how electricity works, how atoms works, and when you have this body of knowledge, you kind of feel very comfortable when you can, that if someone asks you something beyond this time, yes, most likely it's not it is certainly that in all of those areas there are things that I don't know. But I feel much more comfortable talking about many different aspects and go in different directions with people, especially with for example with yourself. I have a rough idea of what we will be talking about in terms of technology, but not only. And it is much easier for me right now to talk with you or with someone else, because I'm kind of along for the ride. Whatever you want to talk about, I'm willing to go there. Maybe I will be able to bring some valuable insights there. Maybe not. We'll see, right? But trying to putting in work to actually gain experience in a very broad area and variety of different things that you have, that you maybe know at least something about how they work. This was helpful very much for me, and this, I'm not sure, I guess this would be the most significant thing that helped me, and this is what I wanted to share with people.
I think the most important thing here is that if you say it gives me more confidence and I'm fine with the amount of knowledge that I have, then it's super. It's really very, very nice and very good. I think the problem with the imposter syndrome is more that people keep saying that they are not good enough and not good enough and not good enough. So it's the same amount of knowledge, but it's being seen in a different way. So it's like never being good enough, never being confident enough to talk about something. I'd say the opposite way of seeing this, the whole stories. To have some talks and write about something, even if you don't think that you know everything or you have a solid ground, because either you gain some experience or you might have a specific knowledge which helps others, and other people don't know about it that much. It's like I had to think about my PhD and the presentation of my thesis. And I was super nervous, but my supervisor told me, look, in this room, there's maybe 2 or 3 people that know your topic as in-depth as you know it. The rest is more superficial. They will ask you different questions, and it's okay not to know the answer to other questions which diverge from your very specific topic. And they might ask you some more superficial questions, and you will know the answer because you went deeper. So after that, when I'm nervous regarding some potential questions that I am not able to answer, I'm thinking that I had this very, very specific problem, and I'm talking about this very specific issue. So the likelihood that there is someone there in the room who has had this very specific issue, who know better, is quite low. And even if so, it depends on the way you discuss it. So if someone just contributes to the discussion, then you have the opportunity to learn from someone, and this is perfect. And if someone tries to bully you and I don't know, tell you don't know nothing, well, it tells more about the person itself. So yeah. For me, it's more dealing with my own inconfidence and telling myself it's you just only feel it. It's not really likely that you will screw it that dramatic.
It's interesting that you said when you said that kind of there's not many people that actually know this topic as good as you do, and I feel about this. For sure, I can take some junior engineer. I have been doing engineering for 10 plus years, so I can take an engineer who has been doing software engineer for let's say half of a year, right? In some technology, right? And there are things about this technology that they know that I don't know.
Yes.
Yes, maybe they only like very narrow focused on these technologies, but there are things that they can tell me that I don't know. And it's cool to kind of realize that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's interesting. I want to like kind of a little bit aside. I wanted to talk with you like a little bit about the tech itself. You mostly focused on Angular, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Yes.
Is it because of your work? Like, is it because of your work, or is it because of this NG conference that you started to work with? How did it turn out that you focused on Angular that much?
Well, I didn't have a choice. No. Well, kidding. In my first job after the studies, we were working with AngularJS, so that's how it started for me. And then, like, I had a break being a IT consultant and a developer, and then when I came back, there was natural for me that since I had the basics in AngularJS, I'd focus on Angular because it's okay. Back then, I didn't realize that the break between AngularJS and Angular was so big. But then I thought, like, okay, give me a week and I will see my way through this framework and gonna update my knowledge. So that's how it started with Angular. And now it's mostly because of the projects. That's just a danger. Once you do something, you get comfortable with this framework and you tend to do different further projects with this framework as well. So yeah, for now it's more like a convenience.
Do you try to like proactively kind of notice that and push yourself towards actually experimenting with some other technologies? I don't know, approaches.
Sure. Like that's the whole dilemma for private projects. If I want to code something for myself, that would be really quick and easy for me to do this in Angular. I know the whole setup and then it's done. But I try to pick up something which makes more sense for this particular website. Which, if this is just a very basic static website, there is no reason to do this in Angular. I can do it with just HTML, JavaScript, or use some static site generators or something. So with private projects, I try to challenge myself to make myself more slower on purpose, so that I learn other frameworks and technologies.
This is actually because what I have also realized in my life is that I have been, for the first like half, let's say, of my career, maybe a little bit more, I primarily was working on the projects at my job, right? And I was doing them. I was doing like, I don't know, like 12 hours a day, like every day and stuff like this. But then at some point I got an opportunity to kind of start my hobby projects, right? And it always goes, I think, from the goals, like why are you doing, right? Because like technology studies I think should be going from there. But for me it was just like a field for experiments, like just like throwing it. First of all, like at some point, like yes, you don't want to just experiment in vacuum, right? Because it is kind of, it's like as like you trying different languages by writing hello world. I mean, like come on, you kind of don't really get a feel for it.
Yes.
For the language, but because you need to go a little bit deeper, right? Because I think every language right now has a hello world, like, and it is very simple. Right? Yes, but having like an actual problem that you want to solve is very helpful, right?
Yes.
But try the way how you're trying to solve it, as approaching it as like, again, your field for experiments, right? You can do things, you can experiment with them, you can redo things and stuff like this. And I personally have learned like a huge amount from just doing those like personal hobby projects. And it was very, very, very useful for me. And And for example, I was doing Angular as well in my at some point in my career. I don't remember much of it, to be honest, already, because I was doing both things, like an Angular JS at the very beginning, and then Angular 2, then it changed to 8, and I'm not like following all of this anymore. And because I'm not following all of this, I also wanted to ask you, I kind of thought about, since you are very deep in the Angular ecosystem and stuff like this, are there any, maybe, people maybe some misunderstand certain aspects of Angular that commonly, right, and ask like wrong questions, or maybe have wrong assumptions about this framework? Do you experience something like this?
Yes. Well, it's actually quite a common place that many people say that Angular is cumbersome and very opinionated and hard to learn. Well, I do understand why people would say something like this, but there's just one side of this is just one perspective. Regarding this, there are two things. I remember writing an exam in German, and there was something about private law. I don't remember exactly, but it was like 3 hours exam, and I did quite well because since I'm not a German native speaker, I had a limited number of vocabulary, and it was really easy for me to combine those those words to sentences and to write it, because that's what I've learned. I've learned this limited low vocabulary for this use cases, and it helped me because like my German fellow students, they were thinking how to phrase it better, what to say. They had all the choices. And coming back to Angular, I think since Angular implies some limitations on how the things are done, I think it's actually easier to get in because Angular says only this way and not all the others. You don't have to, to consider any other options. You just have this one. So I think it's actually better to get in. And on the other hand, it's also that it comes, this is the price for the features that Angular also has. So I also usually compare it with a furnished apartment. So if you have your favorite sofa and the favorite table, whatever, then you better go to React or Vue, because those are libraries. They don't have much in them, which pre-installed, the things that are pre-decided. But if you this is like an unfurnished apartment. But with Angular, if you don't have anything, you just move in and you're ready to go. And you have your HTTP service, you have your testing clients, you have interceptors, you have a lot of things that are working out of the box. And people get annoyed. Of course, if I have my sofa or my couch and I move into this furnished apartment, it's just stressful and annoying that I cannot do the things my way. And that's why I realized that I do understand that Angular is perceived like this, but it's just the question of the use case.
It's kind of, yeah, it is an interesting thought in terms of, different tools are built, I think with different visions in mind for them, right? And I mean, of course, you can use the tool, but basically you will spend additional efforts if you are not using the tool really for the job that it was created for. When you're trying to hack it, and it feels stressful at this. Maybe at some point it kind of better or easier just to go and create a new thing from scratch, right? But if the tool is useful for you, then if the tool fits your use case, it's just kind of perfect, because you can do what you want and you can do it fairly productively because it is already done, right? But if you want to do something specific, something very unique, then you will need to kind of either find a tool or create go level deeper and create the thing from scratch. And another thing interesting that you mentioned is that this idea of creative constraints, right? I have thought about it a lot in my life, is that when you have like unlimited freedom, it is kind of difficult because you can do everything, but you kind of, but what do you need? And you need to decide, right? And in some case, having limitations is this kind of encourages your creativity in a sense, right? Because you can kind of offload from your head some of the decisions that needs to be made because they have already been made before you, and you kind of accept them as a ground truth, and then you can focus on some other thing that you are working on. It is very interesting. I have always thought about it, as a painter, when you have a sheet of paper and it is completely white, and you're just starting, you can pretty much draw anything you want, right? But the question is like, what should you draw, right? And of course it is, for example, even having a goal, like why do you draw something, right? Because like, I just want to draw, like, okay, what? But if you want to try to solve some problem, okay, I have an idea and I want to communicate it to the people, and this is the best way I envision how it could be represented with a picture. It is good start. You have like something to go from. And it's interesting because even if software engineering, what I found for myself, for example, is that when I was trying to learn, I don't know, technologies for the sake of just learning, it was not very productive because like I kind of read the information, but it doesn't stick, right? But then once I started to kind of have more specific goals in the world that I want to solve. For example, I have a specific problem in the world that I want to make it easier to find some information, and you need like search engine. And then when you learn some information, you kind of, okay, this is how it fits here, here, and here, and it is a nice picture that you have some experience and some problems, some context that you can attach new knowledge to, and this is how you can organize it in your memory, in your head, and later recall. This is what I found in my life.
Actually, I totally can relate to this picture. Like, should I have more time, I'd love to create a website for web development, maybe just for front-end development to scope it a bit, which starts with HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and then I have a mind map with problems, because it's all about problems. We are all solving the same problems, but solving them in a different way. In front end, it's all about performance, so we have different approaches with single page applications, multi-page applications, hydration, partial hydration, whatever. So I see it as a mind map with problems and then solutions as leaves. And so that you can navigate those and see what are other options. Like, let's say, I have a problem, what are my actions? And regarding your point that once you have this problem, you can ask questions, I think being a good developer is a lot about asking the right questions. Like, it's about Googling, searching, but you are efficient and successful when searching for something if you search in the right place, like with the right intent, with the right search item. So for me, it's really hard to start with, I don't know, how Angular works. It's more like the more specific you get, the more specific is your question, and then the better phrased is your question, the better you know what exactly you're looking for and what you're not looking for. And the likelier it is that you get the answer to a question. So yeah, for me, it's also it doesn't help to start with I want to learn a framework. It's more about I have this particular problem, I need to solve it with this framework, and then you are more specific, and then you have more specific answers.
Yeah, and for me, for example, the reason why initially, like, when I was starting as an engineer initially, I knew that I wanted to become better, but I kind of didn't really understand, like, what does it mean, right? Just to know more technologies, right? But but I at the beginning, I never, like, I was trying to learn more and more technologies, but I never kind of considered it in a way that it is not just about learning technologies. Technologies are like tools that help to solve like problems. So Igor, what you need to do is first kind of sit and spend some time thinking about what kind of problems do you want to solve in the world, right? And it is like, I'm describing it right now, it seems very reasonable and obvious, but it is not what I thought initially, right? And it took me like, I started to, the reason why I started to think about all of this is because I was learning more technologies, right? I wanted to become better, and I was developing my career kind of. And my career, in a sense, I was lucky, and my career, the progression was fairly rapid, right? And I was thinking about, like, okay, yeah, you can make a projection where you will be in like couple of years, right? But like, why? And then my experience was that in the first like 4 years, my career was very rapid, from like a junior engineer to the lead engineer. And then I had kind of a pause when I was for several years thinking about the life, right? What I want to do. And this is the moment where I started to think more about not just like learning technologies for the sake of technologies, but what kind of problems I want to do to solve, right? And then maybe for the last like a year or so, I was more or less, I had a much better picture in terms of what kind of problems I want to solve. It is still not like completely like fleshed out and exactly crystal clear, but it is in a much better state than it was when I was just starting and stuff like this. And it has been very very helpful when I was learning, even stuff that doesn't relate to doesn't kind of like everything kind of relates, but not direct. Like for example, even learning things like physics or mathematics, right? It is much easier for me because I understand how it feels and I understand why I need to do that, right? Which is also very interesting. Another point is that, for example, when I was in school and college and stuff like this, I was going to classes, but I kind of didn't really understand why. Like, we are going, like, all my peers are going to school, we are going to school. Why are we doing this? Nobody told me, right? And if someone told me, like, the reasons why you would want to do that, I think that would be very helpful.
Absolutely.
And I'm not sure, like, when you were going to school, did you kind of realize, like, why do you need to learn? Or you were doing this because this is kind of life around me, this is what we are doing here?
Well, actually, it was so the first 9 years. I think in the last grade, I suddenly realized that I don't have to go to school. Nobody has. It's just a social convention. And that was really like a revelation to me. Like, oh, actually, I'm doing it. I've been doing this because everyone does all the years, not thinking about it, not being aware of doing this, like, intentionally. So yeah, I really remember this moment when I first asked myself this question. So that was the last grade, so I just went through and it was fine. So I think if I had asked myself this, I don't know, maybe in the 8th grade or so, I might have had a harder time at school because I'd start questioning if I must go to school. Maybe I can choose the subjects that I want to study and not studying everything. But yeah, happily for me, it was late enough so that I went.
But wouldn't it be better if you kind of realized it earlier and you could focus your attention and time where you wanted, and you on the things that you wanted to do instead of doing like everything a little bit? No? Wouldn't you want to know about all of this earlier?
I don't know. For example, I love math, and I used to love math in school as well. I have nothing to do with it right now. So if I'm thinking about my professional perspectives, going to the math classes wouldn't be reasonable. I should invest all my time into informatics. But it was something which I just enjoyed, and it's maybe I don't mind having the basic. That's the same. Coming back to, you first need to have the problem to understand your problem. Then you can ask the right questions. The same goes with, you need some basic education so that you can, based on this education, ask proper questions or go deeper. So and saying, oh, this area looks interesting, so I really want to have I want to dig deeper into astrophysics, or I don't know, do more about the foreign languages, whatever.